Are you sick and tired of losing to gold ships? Every time your Ogres, your McQueens, your Tails, your Grass Wonders about to cross the finish line when all of a sudden a majestic stallion seemingly teleports right in front of you when they were nowhere to be seen for 99% of the race. Well, there's just Taurus Cup, with Gemini Cup around the corner being an almost free win for end closers with straightaway spurt. You can be assured that pretty much every single lobby will have those gold ships, if not gold ships and Narita Taishins abusing the meta that is end closers. However, what if I told you there might be a solution to this? With the power of both front runner Haru Urara and evil nature, we are finally here with the perfect tech, the perfect anti-meta in the upcoming CM, front runner evil debuff air group.
順天と反転、それぞれの無限を衝突させることで生成される仮想の質量を押し出す挙式紫。
Hey guys, UmaPokke here, and today we are going to be taking a look at how front runner air groove may be your winning ticket against the onslaught of opponent end closers for this upcoming Gemini Cup. I do need to pop your bubble first beforehand. No, you cannot escape running end closers yourself if you really want to increase your odds of winning. But what front air groove does is basically take everything we have learned so far from evil nature and front Haru Urara to merge into perhaps the easiest to build yet most effective debuff Umas, especially for players without access to multiple aces. Kindly check out this evil nature guide to see how debuffs Uma work, as well as the front Haru Urara guide here to understand pacing strategy, both of which will be integral as to why we are running air groove. So we're going to be exploring the two reasons why she'll be our choice debuffer for this upcoming CM, which are the pacing aspect as well as the debuff aspect. This is also a way for you to see why we're not choosing evil nature or front Haru Urara, and it has everything to do with the opponent matchups. As you know by now, end closers will be extremely dominant in the upcoming track. If they are the meta, then air groove is, like I mentioned, the perfect anti-meta with a fraction of investment needed while being effective against Tolenas who do not run an air groove themselves. You don't need her 3-star, you don't need crazy inheritance, and you don't need crazy MLB support cards. We'll break down the build a little bit later, but let's see why air groove, or rather front air groove, is so strong as your premier debuff Uma choice in this CM. At this point, remember to smash the subscribe and like button, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as to what do you think of this strategy over here, as we are about to approach 10,000 subscribers for UmaPokke. The first reason why is going to be the pacing aspect. Now, in terms of pacing, as you would have known for now, having a front runner from our previous front Haru Urara strat last CM will eliminate the potential lucky pacer phenomenon, and if this happens to you, that's great, but if this happens to your enemy, then your pace chasers are likely going to be in a very rough scenario. For Gemini Cup, a lucky Daiwa Scarlet can be extremely potent, especially if Resplendent Ray Ace procs and she maintains a position, so we want to remove that threat completely by having a front runner ourselves. However, there's one massive difference between front Haru Urara as well as front air groove, which is that air groove's aptitude is going to be an A turf and E long. This means that she's actually able to hold her position and last in the race for a very good while, all the way until the end of the middle spurt, and this is extremely important because unlike front Haru Urara, who will slow down the race of the pace and thereby reducing your stamina consumption, you actually do not want to give your enemies an easier time hitting the stamina checks for these long races such as 3200 meter Kyoto turf in Gemini Cup. In contrast, you want to eliminate the potential lucky pacer, build enough stamina for yourself, and completely destroy your enemy Umas, and ensure that the stamina consumption for this race is still going to be very high because your enemy Umas will have a harder time hitting their stats once we go into the next portion. The only thing you care about is raising her front runner style from a D to anything higher, while having an E long aptitude is going to be completely fine. As you can see from this clip over here, she still maintains her position relatively well because of her A in turfing. Now, moving on to the debuff aspect as to why we also want to give her a little bit more better rating in the front runner is going to be her built-in kit that is going to be the Fluster end closer as well as the Hesitant end closer. Air Groove is the only Uma in the entire game that has access to both of this built-in at potential 2 as well as potential 4 respectively, directly targeting the strongest archetype for this upcoming CM, which are enclosers like Ghost Ship as well as Naruto Taishin, due to their access to Straightaway Spurt, which is the single strongest skill for this course. Having the built-in guaranteed access to a stamina and speed debuff on the enclosers without praying for any hint RNG makes Air Groove a very easily accessible unit to any player's arsenal. Compared to the previous most popular debuffer Evil Nature, her built-in debuff is Hesden Late, Mystifying Murmur as well as All-Seeing Eyes. Now Murmur only procs on medium, so that's completely useless, and late surges are not going to be the main threat since you're most likely going to be facing up against enclosures as well as a few pace chasers here and there. While All-Seeing Eyes are really good because it is a very nice stamina debuff towards the later race, the problem is getting Nice Nature to be in range for All-Seeing Eyes and hit the enemies at the final portion. This means that if you did not give Nice Nature enough stamina, she'll most likely fall all the way to the back, which means that this stamina debuff will be completely useless, missing the enemy Umas in front of her, particularly against the enclosers. Now for players who do want to run Evil Nature, getting some stamina skills and late surger savvy is highly recommended as seen from my build over here, because this Nice Nature was actually able to keep up towards the end and proc her All-Seeing Eyes. If you really wanted a second debuffer, focus on encloser and pay stamina debuffs over the speed debuffs in this particular portion. As such, Air Groove is going to be much more suitable in the upcoming Gemini Cups because her debuffs are not vision tight while being extremely effective against enclosers. So pairing this up with a front runner Air Groove to remove Lucky Pacer and the built-in debuff that's going to be targeting every single one of the enclosers, this is pretty much why front Air Groove would be the premier debuff Uma choice. So at this point, who should be building Air Groove for this CM? Honestly, everyone. It's like your local mall giving out free PS5s or 1590 GDX. There's no reason to not have a single Air Groove because she is basically a free slot tree, giving her kit and synergy with your own Umas, as well as debuffing every strong ace you will most likely face in the upcoming CM. Generally speaking, most players should bring at least one debuffer for these stamina heavy races like the 3200 meters. Not only does this reduce the demand for herself, chasing the perfect RNG in multiple aces, getting the 1200 speed, 1200 stamina with double or triple gold recoveries, it also makes the opponent Umas much weaker, especially when using stamina debuffs from front Air Groove or Evil Nature, because most trainers for this CM will barely hit the stamina checkpoints due to the accelerated schedule as well as the lack of good cards this early into the global server. If you think hitting stamina checks for Taurus Cup was that hard because of 600, 700 debuffs, I would dare say even more trainers would be feeling the stamina checks for this Gemini Cup, and having Air Groove to debuff the stamina even further means that as long as you hit a stamina check for your own aces, there's an extremely high chance you're able to win against the opponent Umas. Air Groove herself is also extremely easy to raise since we do not care about her star level and only require potential 4 to unlock all of our encloser debuffs. Since they're also inherently built into her kit, there are no such things such as hint sniping or event RNG to get them, unlike Evil Nature praying for the R Rudolph or Raishao hint RNG. With that, we'll come to the last portion, which is exactly how do you build a front runner Air Groove. As mentioned earlier, Air Groove is much easier to build unlike Evil Nature. Her debuff floor is very high because she is built perfectly against enclosers, which is gonna be the anti-meta for this upcoming CM. Inheritance wise, we'll purely focus on trying to increase her front style as high as possible. I literally just filtered out my front and slapped on whoever I have over here, which is in this case Bakshin as well as Marozensky. The skills and inheritance are much less important. Stat lines to aim for are going to be 600 speed, 600 stamina, as well as 1000 wit. If your inheritance Umas somehow also has debuffs built in, like Grass Wonder, Rudolph, or Agnes, then even better, but not necessary, because we do want to get our front to be as high as possible. For the long distance remaining at E, I've noticed that my Air Groove was still able to maintain her pacing, so whether or not this is going to be D, B, or even any improvements is not going to be as significant. Now, I do want to touch on a little bit for the stamina portion, which is for this particular race, aside from having high wit, you ideally want to have a little bit more stamina compared to the previous debuffers, especially if you think you're up against a Daiwa Scarlet, to prevent Daiwa from proccing Raid Ace too early. If you're going to be running your own Daiwa Scarlet as a pace chaser, you can actually intentionally lower your Air Groove stamina to let your pace Daiwa overtake Air Groove and proc her own Raid Ace. You can see from this clip over here, my own Air Groove run towards the end of the the middle spurt, she eventually ran out of stamina, which allowed the opposing Daiwa Scarlet to proc her Resplendent Red Ace, which allowed her to gain a massive lead over the rest of my Umas. But luckily, my double debuffers here completely killed her stamina, and honestly speaking, this Daiwa had way too little stamina in the first place, which eventually still allowed my Ghost Ship to win. If this Daiwa Scarlet was any stronger with like a 1100 or even 1200 stamina and was able to maintain this lead all the way towards the end, then that would have been a concern for you. For your support cards, it's honestly super flexible. Since she already have Hesitant and Fluster Enclosers built in, I opted for a triple wit to get as close to 1000 wit as possible in order to increase our debuff proc chance, while getting the Rise Shower and Super Creep over here for more stamina and more debuffs for Pace Chasers as well as Enclosers. Our Rudolph was me trying to snipe Subdued Ends as well as Subdued Pace. Sunday was for Hesitant Pace Chasers, and Agnes, well, is simply just because she was my MLB wit card. If you have your own Rise Shower card, feel free to swap out Agnes to anything else, for example, like a bored MLB Fine Motion. Tojo Sweep over here was gonna be my speed card instead of Kirasan Black because I wanted to snipe Trick Front as well as Lone Wolf, but only do this if you are sure that you can hit the speed threshold to finish your career, ideally between 600 to 650. For a skills priority, this is me trying to cover the grounds for a potential Pace Chasers, which are still pretty dominant if well built, namely the McQueens as well as Daiwa Scarlets. But your main priority should still remain on the Enclosers, which the debuffs are already more or less there in the Air Group's base kit. For the skills itself, you want to try and get the triple Encloser debuffs, 2 of which being built in, and Subdued is not super important because it's an early raise stamina drain, but if the Umas do not have enough stamina, then the more the merrier. This is then followed by Pace Chaser debuffs in the order of Flustered, followed by Hesitant, followed by Subdued, all of which is going to be coming from a support deck. If you do not have these Pace Chaser debuffs, it's actually completely fine because Enclosers are still going to be our most dominant threat here, but it is still going to be a nice bonus. Lone Wolf is very nice to have just to prevent your opponents from proccing because, you know, Lone Wolf Incident. And the additional skills like Firm for Power, Standard for Stamina, and Sunny for Guts are okay if you have the skill point to spare, which should be very plentiful because you really only need these 6 debuffs, assuming you actually land them. I got an additional groundwork from Rudolph just to maintain your lead a little bit in the front, but it is also not necessary. Now, during the career itself, it's extremely similar to Evo Nature with hint sniping and hitting enough stats to finish the run. Snipe out Rudolph's skills early if you can afford to, and like I mentioned, skill points are not that big of an issue even if you do not spam races. As you can see over here, I only had 8 wins out of the 15 races, and most of them being part of Air Group's career, but I still have access to all these skills as you can see from this build over here. Lastly, make sure to hit at least 600 speed and 600 stamina to clear UI Finale, and bring wits up as high as you can, and like I mentioned, a little bit higher stamina if you want to account for the Pace Chaser Daiwa Scarlets. With that, we have come to the end of a very fast, very quick little Evo Air Group guide that most of you guys can make use of in this upcoming Gemini Cup. To this day, I still have not gotten a single usable AZ because, you know, the Gemini Cup is so fast. So all the best to everyone who is still going to be hunting for their Aces as well as builds in this upcoming CM. Or if you're going for the next Mao CM, we're going to be getting another guide for you guys as well. Alright, so with that, we have come to the end of today's content. All the best for your CM, all the best for your gacha pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.